Good afternoon, everybody, and a very, very warm welcome to the third of our 6 sessions. You will notice from the top right-hand corner, we are recording this session. So if anyone is not happy about being recorded, if anyone is not happy about being recorded, could you please switch off your audio? And if possible, just in the chat, send a little message to Gloria so that we know that you do not want to be in the recording. The second thing I want to ask is, we've got 3 speakers today, and after each of the speakers, we're going to have 10 minutes for discussion. And during those 10 minutes of discussion, we would like one person in the group to take notes and maybe put it into the chat box again, so that Gloria can have that. So during the 10-minute discussion, could you please use the chat box for your notes for Gloria? Should there be any questions during the talk, again, please use the chat box, write your questions in there. So if we could then just bow our heads now so that we can start in prayer. Heavenly God, we, your children, come before you in prayer. In baptism, we promised to be a part of the one body of Christ. In confirmation, we received the Holy Spirit. Within that, the fruits of the Spirit, so that we might practice your will. Help us to cultivate love amongst all peoples in your name. Lord, we ask forgiveness for any of our omissions. As we know the Trinity, it is through his love that we together say, Amen. May I now introduce our first speaker, a woman I'm sure you all know already, Mrs. Margaret Ann Pliskin, who is the immediate past chair to the Catholic Association for Racial Justice. And Margaret will now speak to you for 15 minutes. Margaret Ann.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yogi. Thank you, everybody. My time is limited, and I would like to begin with 2 apologies. The first is that I'm going to read some of this because I tend to go off on tangents, and because of the time constraints, I think it's safer if I follow a course. And the second is that your invitation to this Zoom session refers to the recently published Kaj reading list. It should really say the soon to be published Kaj reading resource list. And I take full responsibility for that delay, which I will get into in a minute. The decision to compile our resource list was so that we could have something on the website that anyone who needed or wanted these resources could dip into. And it came about several months ago as a response to everything that was going on here in Britain and in the world. The Black Lives Matter movement, the disproportionate impact of COVID on Black and minority ethnic groups, as well as the disproportionate economic impact that it seemed to be having on these groups. And at the time, it seemed a worthwhile and time-limited project. And I have to say, I had absolutely no idea of the scope of the undertaking. So several months later, I'm still reading books, magazines, and blogs. I'm still watching videos and podcasts and films and documentaries and TED Talks. And I'm learning and trying to catalog as I go along. So we're getting there, but we're not there yet. And I do appreciate now that this will always be an ongoing exercise. There's no single comprehensive list of resources on the multitude of topics that fall within the realm of racial justice and anti-racist materials. So why are we doing this? Obviously, addressing issues around race and racial inequality is central to the mission of CAJ. And we recognize that meaningful and sustainable change has to start with our individual and collective commitment to fighting the inequality and racism we find around us. Today, I don't want to get bogged down in terminology, but I'd just like to say two things about the words that I'm going to be using. I'm going to use the word Black, and I'm going to use it as a comprehensive word for simplicity and for clarity. And I'm using it as being synonymous with Black and minority ethnic, or Black, Asian, and minority ethnic, or people of color. It's just for simplicity, I'm using the word Black today. And I'm using the terms racial justice and anti-racism interchangeably. Some people say anti-racism is racial justice in action. Others say that racial justice is anti-racism in action, but I'm using them synonymously today. And hopefully that's a discussion for another time, and we'll get to that. So because there's not enough time to go through everything with you, I'd like to share with you some of the headings that we have been gathering information under. And again, I make it clear that these are not set in stone. And then I'm going to focus on what's most relevant for us today, which are the educational resources. So we have books, and we have all kinds of books that we will have on the resource list. Things from, we have biographies from Malcolm X for beginners to the story of Lewis Hamilton, the racing car driver. We have books by Black authors. A very popular book at the moment, I don't know how many have heard of it, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. It's been on the bestseller list since it came out about 2 years ago, to real classics like, by authors like Angela Davis, James Baldwin, The Wretched of the Earth by Frantz Fanon. We have documentaries and films, Netflix documentaries. We have the BBC drama Sitting in Limbo, which was inspired by the Windrush scandal, and Black and British, which is about overlooked Black figures from British history. We have podcasts. There's a popular podcast for young people called Blackticulate, which is about young people, young Black professionals, how they do what they do so that young Black people can emulate them. I'm just giving you a brief description of what we have. We have lists specific to Black History Month and Black Lives Matter. We have resources specific to the Stephen Lawrence inquiry in 1999, up to the recent Windrush Lessons Learned review in 2020. And both of these reports called for a greater understanding of histories of empire, colonialism, and migration to combat racism in our institutions. The Windrush Lessons Learned review states the Windrush scandal was in part able to happen because of the public's and officials' poor understanding of Britain's colonial history, the history of in- and outward migration, history of Black Britain. We want to get around that. We want to move beyond that. We have a series of publications from the Runnymede Trust, and I think Melvin will speak to one of these in a short while. We have publications by CAJ, statements from the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales, the US Catholic Bishops' Conference, and other Catholic publications, as well as ecumenical publications. So we have a vast array of materials. Now I'm going to focus on the educational resources that we have. And our educational resources that we're making available fall into two main categories. The first is resources for educators and parents, and the second is resources for students. And we're using the term educators in the broadest sense as people who are advocates for the equitable treatment of all students in school and in the community. We recognize that educators have to be prepared to talk to students about race issues and anti-racism. And we know that there are many educators out there who are committed to racial equality in education, but do not know where to begin. And I'd like to take a couple of minutes to speak to you about this. On the 29th of October, which was just last week, Thursday, YMCA, England and Wales, published a report entitled Young and Black, the Young Black Experience of Institutional Racism in the UK. It sets out Black people's perceptions of institutional racism in the UK today in a number of important areas, notably education, police and crime, health, employment, and finance. And one of the main discoveries was that in education, young Black people feel that racial stereotypes have the potential to negatively impact their development opportunities. So I'd like to share with you 3 of the key findings of the research, which indicate why it's so important that we, as people involved either directly or peripherally in the education of young people, avail ourselves of the wide selection of resources that are out there. First finding, young Black people experience racism both in school and at okay, there. But 95% of Black young people and use of racist language at school. And 78% of young Black people reported hearing and witnessing racist language in the workplace. Young Black people said they expect to experience racism because of the color of their skin. I mean, that's quite powerful, that they have an expectation of racism because of the color of their skin. The second finding, young Black people feel the need to change to be accepted in society. 70% of young Black people have felt the need to change their hair to be, and I quote, more professional at work or at school. Policies or implicit standards at schools and workplaces risk causing cultural erasure for young Black people if they feel prevented from being their authentic selves. Third finding, young Black people feel racial stereotypes could negatively impact their academic attainment. 49% of young Black people feel that racism is the biggest barrier to attaining academic success in school, while 50% say the biggest barrier is teachers' perceptions of them. For example, being seen as too aggressive. Almost half of young people identified racism as the most significant obstacle to their academic success. In a statement, Denise Hatton, the chief executive of YMCA England and Wales, said, "It is shameful that young Black people growing up in the UK continue to do so within a society that engulfs them with racist language and discriminatory attitudes. For too long, we have allowed systems to turn a blind eye and a deaf ear to what has been taking place right in front of our faces. We must listen to what young Black people are saying right now and create the fundamental and vital change they are crying out for in order to create a better present and a brighter future. Change must come swiftly, collaboratively."
2 minutes, Margaret.
How many? What do I have left, Yogi?
2 minutes.
Oh my God, meaningfully and with longevity. So how do we bring that about? Okay, I'm going to quote from a thing called Action for Children's Heritage and Inclusion. And this is something that was done by children, telling teachers and educators what they need. Our experiences at school must be positive. We need to have faith and trust in our teachers. We need to see and feel that they understand and they protect all children and young people. We need reassurance that they believe in us and we can too. We hope that teachers understand the challenge we face and know that at times we don't have the same opportunities as others due to racism, prejudice, and barriers. We know that the road ahead might be difficult and feel that if teachers could empathize and provide a little extra support and safe spaces for us to grow, we would have enriched experiences and have a better opportunity to be recognized and take part. will stop there. I have so much more. Perhaps
Thank you ever so much, Margaret.
A pleasure.
There is so much in that.
Yeah.
I'm going to now ask, we're going to go into groups, and remember in your discussion groups, if you would please make sure that somebody makes a note in the chat box so that Gloria, our administrator, has something from your discussions. So 10 minutes, if you could be back by 3:56, we'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. If you could unmute yourself.
It's supposed to be like. I hope the discussions went well and you remembered to take some notes and that you've sent them on to Gloria. I'm now going to call on our second speaker, who is Mrs. Nicole Moore. And Nicole is one of our associates as the Catholic Association for Racial Justice. And Nicole will speak to us for 20 minutes. Nicole?
Hello, hi, thank you, Yogi. I see you've married me today, Mrs. Nicole Moore. You married me. I need to, I need to sort of share the screen.
My apologies, Nicole. I don't know why. It's because we had Mrs. Margaret Ann Fiskin. It's Ms.
Okay.
Nicole, sorry.
It's fine. I'm trying, I need to share the screen. I think Gloria is going to allow me to do that. Hope so. Okay, great. Okay, yes, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for participating in this. I am going to speak, as Yogi said, for about 20 minutes, and my first slide show is to do with making history more inclusive. If it would come up, I'm seeing it, but it's not wanting to come up. I don't know why any of it isn't coming up. Okay, I'm going to try again. I've been having a lot of techno woes actually, and Margaret Ann, that's why I missed most of your it really isn't allowing me to come up. Okay, okay, well, I am supposed to be sharing this slideshow with you all about making British history, more inclusive. And I was having a bit of a conversation with Mr. Zipfel and other people in the last few days, just saying to them that sometimes I think that using the term Black history in the context of British history, sometimes inadvertently we're niching it and we're making it, I feel sometimes we're kind of othering it. So actually it's gonna come up. I think it's coming. Yay, it's coming. Can everybody see the screen? Can one person at least say yes, we can?
Yes, it's there now. Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Making history more inclusive. Okay, so I've quoted from Benjamin Zephaniah in an article he did for The Guardian, last month, in which he said the term Black was political and not a reference to skin color, something that many people find difficult to understand these days. And I've put that quote by him as a kind of starting point for this, because that is how when I use the term Black, that is how I use it. It is inclusive of African, Asian, Caribbean, and Asian, not just South Asian, but all. And people may not agree, but for me, I find it a much more palatable, certainly a much more palatable term to use than BAME, which I really kind of steer clear from a lot, most times. The general trend when I'm saying when speaking about or teaching Black history in the UK is to start at the point of the 22nd of June, 1948, when the SS Empire Windrush arrived. And I feel that the significance of that day and what came after is not diminished at all if we also encourage students to have an understanding of what came before. And I'm not going to go into that, nor am I going to actually give us in this time, because the first slot of the 20 minutes, the first 10 minutes, I'm not giving us a kind of overview of the history of Black people in Britain. Well, you'll see what I'm doing as we go in. Peter Fryer, in his book Staying Power, which was published in 1984, began that really important text with the sentence, "There were Africans in Britain before the English came here." And Gary Young, who's a writer whose work I really have come to over the years more and more really kind of admire. I hold a lot of store by his writing. He actually said, and I'm looking for it now, that book, reading that line was so important. It was so sort of powerful for him to know that, for him to really kind of grasp that. And I think that that's a really, just that sentence, there were Africans in Britain before the English came here, by Peter Fryer, is, I feel, a great way to kind of, if we're teaching history, a great way to kind of get students exploring and thinking and just really kind of going into it. So that what happens is that you won't then just begin at the, which is, there's nothing wrong with it, but with that, but to just begin always at Windrush, I think is not doing full service. Okay, National Archives back up Peter Fryer when they say people of African and Asian origin have lived in Britain for at least 2 millennia. They arrived here many hundreds of years before the massive forced migrations sparked by the slave trade and the British colonization of India. And by the time the SS Windrush arrived in 1948, Britain had a firmly established Black and Asian population. I think it's really important for us as educators and as those of us specifically as teachers of history to, I'm not a teacher of history, I'm just saying, for us to sort of, to kind of frame the fullness of this history with this kind of information. That's really all I'm saying. This book, I don't know if any of you know of it, The History of African and Caribbean Communities in Britain by Hakim Adi. Full disclosure, he is a good friend. He's one of a handful of Black professors in this country. He's a professor of history, and this book has recently been updated, and it was published a long time ago. And the original publishers then said that they didn't think that there was any, what was it? They didn't think there was an audience for it and refused to republish it, though he asked for this to be republished quite a few times. So another publisher has taken it on board. Anyway, so there's an updated version. So this is certainly something that can be used. Lavinia Stennett, who is the founder of the Black Curriculum, says, we've existed in Britain and been pioneers, inventors, icons, and then colonialism happened, and that has shaped the experiences of Black people, but that is not all we are. So some of you, or all of us, some of us, or all of us maybe will know about the Black Curriculum, this organization which teaches Black history in schools and is campaigning for Education Secretary Gavin Williamson to make it compulsory. I've said, I don't know why I've made this so small, my apologies. I'm saying that now more than ever, there is a plethora of resources to help embed history teaching with the necessary inclusivity. And I came across 2 timelines, they're Black history timelines for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2 from an organization called Twinkie. And you can, the one on the picture on the left is for Key Stage 1 and the one on the right is for Key Stage 2. And it's from an organization called Twinkie, and you can find them online, www.twinkie.co.uk. There are several books currently available as well, as we know, to help us learn more about the Black experience here. And because I sadly missed Margaret Ann's most of it, I just came in at the tail end. I wasn't able to see that list, but I know it will be published on the website. So it would be great. And maybe some of these came out there. So books about the Black experience here in Britain, including those using the Windrush era as a starting point. So 100 Great Black Britons is one, Black and British, which by David Olusoga, who has, this is a version he's made for kind of like a short history and for younger readers, because he does have a rather weighty tome called Forgotten History, and I'm seeing somebody nodding and smiling. Have you bought it already? Yes, really good. Okay. And then you've got David Matthews' Voices of the Windrush Generation. You've also got the Windrush Story, which I don't know if some schools, I really hope schools kind of get in on this book, because it's been quite popular with some people, by K.N. Chimbiri. And then you've got Homecoming, Voices of the Windrush by Colin Grant. And again, full disclosure, he is also a good friend. And actually, for people who may be interested, Radio 3 recently did a program that Colin gave, a series of talking essays in which he kind of talks about different people in history and their sometimes complicated relationship with race. So if people want to find that on Radio 3, if you go online, I'm sure you'd find it. I say that where there are opportunities to explore themes of identity, local community, and relationships in the teaching of history, then there is space for fuller and more inclusive learning. The GPI, or the George Padmore Institute, has successfully introduced students as young as 8 to archives. This is an archive institute that is situated in North London. They can be looked up online, the George Padmore Institute. And they've introduced students as young as 8 to archives. The emphasis at the GPI is on the Black, as in African, Caribbean, or Asian, British experience. And the records housed date from the 1960s. So even if we're feeling teaching history that we're starting from the Windrush period, you won't get that at the GPI. You won't get like 1948 and so on, but certainly from the 1960s onwards, there are collections housed there. And students of all ages find them educative and relevant. And while the majority of materials are suitable for Key Stage 2 and upwards, Key Stage 1 learners, I'm saying, can focus on the life of the GPI's founder, John LaRose, and the founding of New Beacon Books. New Beacon Books is still standing and is this country's first Black-owned bookshop and publishing house, and it too is in. And I'm seeing another nodding head. I can't see everybody, but I'm seeing this lady. you know the, okay, and I'm seeing a thumbs up, thank you. So yeah, so at the George Padmore Institute, with the collections that we have, they include historical campaigns, concerning, including other things, but including education, housing, and policing. And so students can find out about aspects of British history that Black people gave effort and energy to in the cause of racial and social justice, and which are still relevant and resonant today. Yogi, how much time do I have within the first 10 minutes?
9 minutes. You still have 9 minutes, so you're doing okay.
I have 9 minutes left. Okay, great. Okay, so I'm saying just at the end of this particular slideshow that we continue to learn about and share many stories that make up what I feel to be the beauty, complexity, and evolution that is British history. So while I have not gone into any kind of overview of Black British history, those of you who have been with us from the start would have been present when I gave a really kind of a much longer presentation, and it was to do with aspects of Black people in the history, in British history, and that was quite a full presentation. So I hope that this bit has been helpful, and I would definitely urge people to get that book for if you're working with students of any age, because I actually feel it isn't just primary, but also secondary and so on. And I'll go back to this again, just in case people want to look at these books. So 100 Great Black Britons by Patrick Vernon, Black and British by David Olusoga, Voices of the Windrush Generation by David Matthews, The Story of the Windrush, and Homecoming. And for people who may be interested in the timelines, they can be accessed or bought through twinkie.co.uk. I'd never heard of them actually until I began doing this. So that's it. I'm going to go quickly into the next, and the other one is very, very short. The other slideshow is it's really just more books. So just Black literature suggested titles, I say, for Key Stage 1 and 2, but maybe you've had enough of the titles already because of Margaret Ann's list, but these are, sorry. Okay, can you see the, ooh, what happened there? Can people see the screen? think I got rid of something.
Still looking at your last one with the timeline.
Oh, maybe it hasn't.
You might have to change the screen that you share.
Ah, I see. Okay, hold on. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Okay, so that's the last one. It's still there. Let's see. Are you still looking at the last one, or has this one now come up?
Still looking at the last one, I'm afraid.
Okay, I don't know what to do.
Have you tried closing down that PowerPoint? If you close it down, you might go back to seeing all the faces and then make it easier to share again a new slide.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. Annoying.
Keep an eye on the time. You only
Okay,
have
I'm
5
seeing
minutes
you.
now.
Okay,
Go.
5 minutes. Okay, 5 minutes. Okay, hold on, hold on. Oh my God, Yogi, you're scary. Wait. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. I think one of
Yes,
my
we
books.
have it.
Okay, great. I think I've cut one of my books out. What did I do there? I don't know what's happened. Okay, so I'm looking at fiction here for fiction or non-fiction, including poetry for Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2. So some of these books, how can I get rid of this? I want to move my screen across. It just seems right. So I've got a plethora of books here, including the one that I mentioned earlier and showed up, African and Caribbean Communities in Britain. Floella Benjamin, some years ago, brought out her book Coming to England, which was her story about coming here as a child from Trinidad. And most recently, as in last month, so that book that she brought out, Coming to England, I don't know if everybody can see it clearly here, is for, I would say, Key Stage 2 readers. Or very, or quite confident readers, Key Stage 1. But now Coming to England has come out in a younger readers format. So that's quite helpful. So I've put both of those there. The writer, the novelist and poet, Benjamin Zephaniah. There was, this book came out quite a while ago and it was published by Tambrin Publications, Verna Wilkins. She's been an independent publisher for many, many years and has done biographies on both Benjamin Zephaniah and on Mallory Blackman, among others. So I've put both of those there by Tambrin Publications. So one on Benjamin Zephaniah and Mallory Blackman. And quite interesting reading. And Mallory Blackman, of course, well, some of us will know she was a children's laureate some years ago. Book of poetry, Einstein, the Girl Who Hated Math, is a wonderful collection of poems by John Agard. Full disclosure, John Agard is also someone I know, oh Lord. And he has a new book out called Books Make Good Pets. And I really think that this is a great book for children who find reading a little onerous. It's like a really fun way to kind of get them involved and interested. Full of Love is another great one for younger
2
readers.
minutes left, okay?
What? 2 minutes? Okay, people have a look at the screen. My Two Grannies is also a really good one, by Floella Benjamin. And this is a new one edited by Neklish Shukra and Claire Huchan. What is race? It's all questions to do with race, racism, and anti-racism. Okay, moving quickly to older readers, Key Stages 3 and 4. We've got, again, Hakim's book. We've got Dream to Change the World, The Life and Legacy of John LaRose. We've got Andrea Levy, 6 stories and an essay. I think she's an incredible writer. And I think we're missing a trick if we don't introduce students to her. She kind of fills sometimes in her novels, certainly, the empty spaces that history has not yet filled. Poems, selected poetry by Linton Kwesi Johnson, a range of novels by Mallory Blackman, Natives by Akala, collection of poetry, full disclosure for quite a few of these people, but certainly full disclosure for Roger Robinson. He won the T.S. Eliot Prize last year and is a friend. A Portable Paradise, I think, is a really good collection for secondary students to get into. Benjamin Zephaniah's The Life and Rhymes, his autobiography, is out. And this book, Black and British, and I have it with me here. Where is it now? Black and British History, and it's Black Influences on British Culture, 1948 to 2016. And it's actually 32 hours of teaching and learning materials for parents, teachers, guardians, and so on, of secondary school students. So that's one. And yes, and also the story, the New Cross Massacre story. That is a part of this country's 20th century history that I feel more students, older students, certainly should know about and find out about. So a range of books here, and this book, Unheard Voices, was published to coincide with the commemoration of the abolition of the slave trade. So stories and poems, and then it was edited by Mallory Blackman. And
You round up now, please.
That's it. Okay, well, I hope that there has been some usefulness with these titles and what went before. Thank you very much. Thank you, Yogi.
Thank you, Nicole. Miss
Thank
Nicole, thank you very, very much.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that. We're now going to go back into our groups. And yet again, if I could ask everybody to remember to make a note so that we can send that on in the chat box to Gloria. And we're to return within 10 minutes. So Gloria will bring you all back at 4:28, please, Gloria. Thank you.
Gloria?
Back in.
I'm-
Well, thank you very much for being so prompt. I really do appreciate that, and I hope you've all enjoyed the discussion. Our third speaker is Mr. Melvin Lyons, a trustee to CAJ, and Melvin will now speak to us for 15 minutes. Melvin. Over to you, Melvin.
Yes, thank you, Yogi. Thank you very much. I was just unmuting myself and fumbling with my keyboard for a moment or so. Thank you. I've been asked to introduce and review, if you like, a publication that was mentioned briefly by Margaret Ann. And so I'm going to now share some slides and talk through those, and hope that you all have them visible to you. Can you see them okay? Just nod your head, give me a wave or a thumbs up.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And here is the publication, Ethnicity, Race and Inequality in the UK, the State of the Nation. Margaret Ann briefly referenced by saying it's a Runnymede Trust publication. It was initiated by the Runnymede Trust, but it's actually a collaboration with the University of Manchester, the Centre of Dynamics of Ethnicity, and the Economic and Social Research Council. And that is the front cover. It's not just a graphic as such. I want to give you an overview, so I'm going to be covering several points here, and I'm conscious of time. The authors are a team of leading researchers and academics in the field of social science. And really this overview is very much targeted on the premise that this is a very valuable resource for teachers of social science, I think at all levels. I'd also go on to say that it would be a valuable resource in terms of professional development for teachers as well. And it contains a wealth of research and in-depth analysis on policy implementation and practice in the field, and presents a very broad sort of literature review and sets of commentary in some key sectors. All listed there, mainly public service focused, and it's based on a range of citations and evidence, and that literature review is based on numerous publications, and more significantly, major policy initiatives covering many years. So some of the material here goes back to the 1980s to be sort of the major initiatives. National inquiries, official programs, and independent studies. To make life easy and to further illustrate the range of material, there are some key data sets, and these are very nicely presented within the report. There are various tables and graphs and what have you. And so statistics are broken down and put into context as well. A range of survey findings and campaign profiles. So what they're saying here is that a lot of social innovation and development has not come necessarily from developments within government or through agencies. They've actually come from campaigns. So these will be groups that were formed independent of government, that are, have the insights and cited good practice elsewhere and recommend that it be adopted within the UK. More contentiously or more significantly, what the report does is it actually describes a range of barriers to substantive change, establishing equalities and social innovation. So the analysis of this publication is quite critical and quite wide-ranging And particularly on the political theme, they make a number of very interesting points. It does contain some new perspectives, so it's not just a kind of review or a retrospective in its own way. They do actually present analysis of the current situation. And there is a section of the report on racisms in contemporary Britain, which is, I think, a major section of this publication. I'll say a bit more about that as we go through. And it does contain its own recommendations across the themes of the title. In terms of a resource for social studies, and I'm thinking of my audience here, in terms of it being a potential tool for tuition or for referencing for professionals, it covers some key components of social studies. So in terms of civics and government, what the report actually focuses on are the kind of major shifts in the political landscape around race, ethnicity, and inequalities. And some of the comments actually do cite some new forms of political manipulation, where some recommendations and work has actually been rolled back by political developments and political activity. One example would be the Swan report on education and preparing for a multicultural society that contains 71 recommendations. And this is in 1985, so we're not talking about new issues here and concerns. And that was seen at the time as being very critical to allowing practice, delivery of service, and social development to move forward on several footings within the education sector at all levels. Because of changes within the political landscape, those 71 recommendations have had limited impact, not because they've not had value or carried value professionally, purely because of politics as a reaction to the things that were recommended. In terms of culture and society, we're now, relating to that point about political landscape and the shifts in the political landscape, we're now in this situation where it's for or against, it's good or it's bad, it's acceptance or rejection, and with the sort of backlashes and instant responses we see to a lot of discourse about progressive roots. And with the conversation yesterday in College, and we were talking about the response by a government minister recently who declared that certain aspects of study and learning in terms of delivery around race and equalities and social progress, such as Black Lives Matters and critical race theory and so on, that is illegal. And so you have this authoritarian response that's a backlash to discourse within professional circles. Economics, and what we see is this polarization. And again, we've had this public finance has kind of been discredited and not the way forward, private finance, but the toing and froing for or against, and the complexity of market forces. The report actually clearly illustrates how within the social studies context that this is a major pattern and development. This term of contested national histories or stories, and this is in the form, the quotation is exactly in the form as presented in the report, that even now we find that historical developments, historical discoveries and presentations are hotly contested, politically speaking. And this has a bearing on how they're received within the public, they're received within professional practice, can they be used and so on. So lots of material in terms of that. In terms of geography, not strictly geography, I'm talking more human geography. The reports presents and cites lots of relevant demographical patterns, and this data analysis, which is very clearly presented to underpin some of the broader analysis and commentary within the report. In terms of sociology, the report presents a number of key themes and new themes. So I mentioned the racisms, and I'll touch on in a moment, but this is another quote from the report that we're experiencing post-millennial race and racism.
You have 2 minutes left, Marvin.
Thank you. I'm not going to make it, but I'm going to gallop through. Okay, so I was going to talk to you about the state education section of the report and give you a very brief overview, but instead I'm going to flick through the points here and maybe make these available to you later on. Give you a few seconds to quickly digest those. More to come? I mentioned the Swan report, and here we on. This is not mentioned in the report, this last point, but I wanted to throw it in because CARG produced this report in 1985, just to underpin that this is not all recent stuff, it's all been there before. I mentioned this section on racisms in contemporary Britain, and what does it say? That there are new patterns in racist attitudes and actions, creating a broadened platform for alienation, hostility, exclusion, and injustice. They mention the UK Special Rapporteur who came to the UK, and this is another quote directly from the report about striking structural social economic exclusion of racial and ethnic communities in the UK. And the report also cites that there's been a rise in reported hate crime every year since 2013. It mentions that Muslims and Gypsy traveler communities face particularly high levels of prejudice. Religion has become central to contemporary articulations, and this is these new patterns of racism, and that this political mobilization of racism and xenophobia in fringe parties and the political mainstream, this underpins a point I made earlier on, and Brexit is a manifestation of that. And just to give some validation, this is a quote from a major academic endorsing the report. So any of you who are thinking of using it as a resource for teaching material or for your own professional interest, I throw this in to really underpin my own recommendation of it. So Yogi, I hope I've succeeded in galloping through that, and that that was clear enough for you and useful.
It was absolutely excellent. Thank you very, very much, Melvin. I do appreciate that. We're now going to go back into our groups for the last time. And again, I hope you're going to have a good discussion on what you've just heard from Melvin. And if one person would make notes and send it to Gloria. And we'll be back here, please, at 4:52. So Gloria, if you can bring people back at 4:51 so that everyone is back in place by 4:52, please. Thank you. Great, everybody back? Thank you very much for being so good about being back on time.
Thank you.
Now, it is true to say that from biblical times and thereafter from our popes, we have been given documents of teaching and practice on justice. Throughout the ages, we've had these teachings on justice. We know that Jesus Christ himself gave us the greatest commandment of love. He too was ridiculed and thought to be throwing out the law of Moses, that he wasn't following the 10 Commandments. And yet we know today his teaching was there through love to show us that if we loved, then we would not break any of the commandments. I'm just going to give you 3 quotes from 3 of the documents. In Gaudium et Spes, and I quote, "We must respect the equal dignity of all people created in God's own image." How many times have we heard that? Another, in Lumen Gentium, and I quote again, "Respect for human dignity entails a quality of presence that is one of listening to the other, free of preconceived ideas." So not just to listen, but to listen free of preconceived ideas. And then my last quote is from Parchamenteris. Parchamenteris emphasizes again and again, the human dignity and equality should be amongst all peoples. So we should give dignity to all of God's creation. Early today, somebody said, God does not create rubbish. God only creates that which is good. And each one of us, you and I, are created in the image and likeness of our Lord himself. Jesus asks that we care about our neighbors. You know, I'm going to look at the hackneyed gospel that we all have heard several times, and I'm sure all of you could retell. The one on the Good Samaritan. Who is my neighbor? Jesus asks that we care about our neighbors with the same intensity that we care about ourselves. Think about that. To care for your neighbor as you would care for yourself. We are to love as Jesus Christ himself loved us, and he died on the cross for each one of us. Even the enemy is to be redefined as a neighbor. Not an easy task, but that is what is required of you and I as practicing Christians. If we're going to take on board the love of Christ, then this is what we've got to do. This love is more than simply smiling at the stranger or the other. It is trying to develop a positive attitude towards people that do not look like ourselves, who do not behave like ourselves, or who do not come from the same places that we come from. They might not have the same education. They might not dress like you and I. But God says you need to love God, love yourself, and love your neighbor. And all 3 should be equal. We should love God, love ourselves, and love our neighbor. We have to be actively involved with those who are marginalized and oppressed. We think about the current affairs of this country today. Who are those who are marginalized? Who are those who are oppressed? Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. In June 2001, a Palestinian family made an unusual gesture of goodwill in the midst of the bloody violence and deep mistrust between the Arabs and the Israelis. I'm sure a lot of you have already heard the story, but I think it's worth repeating. The Jilani family donated vital organs, including the heart of their son, was shot in the head, and he was shot by Israelis. Now, one would expect this young lad, Mazen Jilani, was only 34 when he died. And one would expect his parents to be stricken with grief and, because of that, with hatred and bitterness. But in fact, it was totally the opposite. Mr. Jilani, having lost his son, could only think of how he could save lives. And so he donated his son's organs to 4 Israelis to give them life. Not just one, but 4. And again, I repeat, in a time of real turmoil between the Arabs and the Israelis. David Cohen is the father of one of those recipients. Mr. Cohen was so overwhelmed by the generosity of Mr. Jilani that he, at the time, could not speak. He was so thrown by this that he cried for hours. And when he did come back, he called for the Jilani family. And he spoke of them as being the noble family who had taught him what is possible and how things could be different when one shows love. This is our greatest gift, the gift of love, to treat others in the way that Christ treats us and in the way we are expected to treat one another. It brings to mind something that happened only a few months ago here in the country. During a Black Lives Matter demonstration, and again, it is something I'm sure you've all seen on the news again and again, we had a man, Patrick Hutchinson, who rushed to the aid of a white man. This man was actually there demonstrating against the Black Lives Matter movement. He was actually in opposition. He didn't approve of these people coming out and saying Black Lives Matter. He was quite upset and angry about this. But when he was hurt and he took ill, Patrick Hutchinson didn't look at the color of his skin. He didn't look to see, you didn't approve of me. He saw a man in need. He saw one of God's creation needing to be saved. He saw a man that needed love. And what did he do? He walked across, picked this man up and took him onto his shoulders. A grown man took him onto his shoulders to go and make sure that he would live, to give him what was necessary. Now, looking back, everybody sees Mr. Hutchinson as a hero. He did something fantastic. But for him, it was simply being Christian. It was simply showing the love of Christ to another fellow being. And yes, at that particular time, this other man might have been his enemy. But he saw through that because he saw another human being created in the image and likeness of God our Father, and he saw love. So on this very positive note, I would like to say a very big thank you to all our speakers. I want to say a very big thank you to all of you who have come to participate in this time with us. I know how precious time is, and I know for many a teacher and for the chaplains and for people who are out at work to have a full day's work and then to come to a workshop like this. I really do appreciate you giving your time, and I pray that it is worthwhile for you. I would appreciate very much if you would all look at our website, that is the CARGE website. We still have another 3 of these sessions. And if you have gained anything from them and you wish to come to the next 3 or one of the 3 or 2 of the 3, And if you would like to tell friends about it, please go to the website and register to join us for the next sessions. We have our annual general meeting this coming Saturday, and again, you'll see all the details on the Couch website. And for those of you who would like to become members, you would be more than welcome. Thank you once again to all of you. Have a very pleasant and blessed evening. God bless all.
Thank you, Yogi.
Thank you, Yogi. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Bye, Susan.
Bye.